You are listening to Terra Signals, presented by Normal Paranormal. I am your host, Justin Bamforth. So we are speaking with Maxim Furek, who is an avid student of the paranormal. His eclectic background includes aspects of psychology, addictions, and rock journalism. He has a master's degree in communications from Bloomsburg University and a bachelor's degree in psychology from Aquinas College. He has been interviewed on numerous podcasts, including Exploring the Bizarre with the legendary Timothy Green Beckley, aka Mr. UFO, and Tim R. Swartz, aka Commander X. His book, Shepton, The Myth, Miracle, and Music, was featured on Australia's Mysterious Universe. Maxim is a contributor to Fate magazine, my site, Normal Paranormal, and the Paranormal Underground. But today, Maxim will be discussing his unexpected journey into the paranormal universe that included the Shepton mythology, as well as his new book, Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit, which has just been released. Where can we get a copy of your book?
Well, Justin, thanks. First of all, thanks you for having me on your show, your podcast, and for this opportunity to talk to your listeners. But yeah, Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit, just was published, just came out by Beyond the Fray Publishing House out of San Diego, and it was just released on Amazon last week. So viewers can purchase a copy of Region Hoodoo and the Shepton mythology on Amazon.com. So check it out. They could at the very least just read about it and see if that's something that they might be interested in. But most people that hear about Shepton, they just think it's just like a most amazing, narrative of the paranormal.
Yeah, and that's it's interesting because you build yourself as a rock journalist and then a paranormal researcher, right? And that's quite a shift. How did this shift happen? When you were writing about some of your earlier books to
it's going to get crazier. First of all, we're allowed to wear as many hats as we want to. So I've always been a rock journalist, and what I do is I take a look at the culture of rock and roll through, I guess I would call it a sociological lens, trying to make some sense of it. And I always felt that music was transformative. And it's so important for the civil rights movement and the anti-Vietnam movement and women's rights and all that. And songs like We Shall Overcome and Blowing in the Wind and, just so many others rallied people. And so music has always been a very important part of me. And I've been a rock journalist. I've had numerous books published about music. My previous book, Somebody Else's Dream, the Dakota, the Boys, and Timothy, celebrated the anniversary of the song Timothy, which seemed to parallel the Shepton mining disaster. So my books sort of play against one another. But how did I go from being a rock journalist to a paranormal author? And what happened was I was writing this book called Somebody Else's Dream. I was just writing something about a rock mythology, the connection between the song Timothy from 1971 and the Shepton mining disaster of 1963. The song was about cannibalism in a mine shaft, and in 63, when 3 miners were entombed for 2 weeks, only 2 came out, and people wanted to know what happened to the 3rd miner. And back then in 63, and even today, there are voices that said that cannibalism took place. So the song Timothy from 71 is about the Shepton mining disaster. What happened was, as I was researching this rock mythology, I realized that there were other elements, other aspects of high strangeness, a term that you taught me. And for example, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, and afterlife experiences, just for starters. So Shepton is quite bizarre and quite the example of high strangeness.
Yeah, it's really bizarre, this whole aspect of high strangeness. Do you feel that sometimes you're kind of being guided on a path to write about certain things? Or do you think you're truly choosing these topics?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. I mean, with the Shepton mythology, I just stumbled into it. I was a rock journalist writing about rock and roll. I was writing about the roots, the genesis of the song Timothy. And Rupert Holmes, when he wrote it, wanted to write a controversial song, so he wrote a song about cannibalism in a mine shaft. That's what it was. And when people looked at it and listened to it, it seemed to parallel what happened in Shepton. And as I explored Shepton, I saw all of these things, humanoid creatures and apparitions and, you know, examples of life after death and just all kinds of strange things. And for your viewers who I'm sure that your viewers are a lot more knowledgeable about a lot of this paranormal, philosophies than I am, but it was Dr. J. Allen Hynek who back in 72, he wrote a book called The UFO Experience. And he talked about strangeness, and we're talking about paranormal elements. And if it had a high strangeness, it had a whole lot of levels of this the paranormal. And Shepton certainly fits into that. I mean, I wanted to call this book The Shepton Convergence because of that convergence of paranormal themes that happen at the same place, basically at the same time. But, Hynek already had that covered with his term, high strangeness. And also for your viewers who have seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the person in Close Encounters was based on Allen Hynek, and he was the one who said that we have three elements of close encounters, and the third one is when we actually see alien life forms, actually meet them. So he was an important individual in ufology, and also he was important as far as us as giving us terminology to help us make sense of what we see and what we talk about. And even today, I mean, you and I and this podcast, I mean, we owe a lot to Allen Hynek for his contributions to ufology and to the paranormal.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Hynek started out investigating UFOs for the government as part of Project Blue Book, but he was a very scientific guy, right? And he started to in the very beginning just debunking a lot of these.
Exactly. I mean, go figure.
Yeah, and then he
What happened
became
there? He
right.
had
He
a total
became a believer.
transformation. He came around.
Yeah, and when you first began your journey into this, subject matter, were you a skeptic? Were you kind of like on the fence about a lot of this stuff, or?
I was, first of all, the one thing that spoke to me were the passion of people such as yourself who are really immersed in this, the aspects of the occult, these mysteries, unexplainable mysteries. And so like that passion just was something that spoke to me. The other thing that I wanted to find out, so I read a whole lot of books about UFOs. I was an avid student of Roswell. I read everything I could get about Roswell, the Philadelphia experiment. I mean, so many different things, trying to find a academic pathway to the truth. And so that's pretty much what I do and what I've done. I consider myself an academic. Trying to find out, trying to put names and labels onto these things that we're looking at, putting them into genres, and all of that helps us to figure it out in the end. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm a true believer, but I mean, like I have a lot of passion for the field, and I want to learn more. And whether it's Bigfoot or UFOs, miracles, apparitions, whatever. I mean, because we're talking about a whole plethora of things, and they're all exciting and they're all fascinating. And as human beings, it's our job to go and search for meaning, and that's what we're doing tonight on a show such as yours.
Yeah, and your background. What I find really interesting is, your career, in the beginning was in psychology, right?
Right.
I mean, so how has that background really helped you to better understand, these various phenomena?
Well, I if anything, it's made me even more curious. I mean, I don't know if having a background in psychology has given me any answers, but when I wrote Co-Region Hoodoo, I quote from Jung and Carl Jung and Freud. And I travel deep into the psychological tenets and philosophy. So co-region hoodoo is different. I mean, certainly it's about the paranormal, but I take a different look, and I use a different aspect. I have a different perspective in looking at this. So, I just can't wait until there's more reviews on Amazon just to see what the readers have to say about it, because the first one by my friend poet John Yamrus he's a friend, and so he wrote a glowing review of the book, which I think was heartfelt. But I need to get a few more from people that don't know me but they know the book. So. Um, I don't know. I mean, I really can't answer your question. How did my background in psychology help me? I mean, it gave me some tools, but I could have been a bricklayer, I could have been a painter, I could have been a rock star, a rock musician, and brought those tools to this forum and used those. So everything we have. I mean, we're all individual, and and we're trying to figure out this together. I mean, it's just the realm of the paranormal is just fascinating and wonderous, and just you know it's there for us to discover.
What now? So for those of our listeners and our audience who is familiar with your work and who may have read Shepton, would you say that co-region hoodoo is an extension of that, or a sequel to that, or is it like a completely different experience altogether? Because you include a lot of other things in co-region hoodoo.
I'd say it's two out of those three that you just mentioned. It's an extension of Shepton, because after I wrote Shepton, the outpouring and the support from the paranormal community was just amazing. And back in 2018, I mean, there was a relaunch. I mean, the book did really well when it came out in 2016. But what I did was I wrote an article for Fate magazine. And that was in 2018. Because of that, I was invited, as you were, to the Fort Fest in Baltimore, where we presented, and I talked about the Shepton mythology. And because of that, Mysterious Universe, the podcast from Australia, heard about me, and they did a 90-minute segment on Maxim W. Furek and the Shepton mythology, which was really kind of cool. I mean, to hear two guys with Australian accents paraphrase, and read through my book was just pretty awesome. So that was it was Fate magazine. It was the Fort Fest in Baltimore. It was Australia's Mysterious Universe. And then the fourth thing, it was actually four wonderful things that happened in 2018 and 2019. And that was the Skeptical Inquirer. And they did an article about Shepton. And the first part of and it was really extensive, but they raved about it and said that the Shepton mythology was the definitive book about the topic. And then at the end, what they did was they had to debunk it and say that they referenced Occam's razor. And the way I understand it, Occam's razor is a very archaic means of, argumentation. And when something is very complex, something with high strangeness, if something is complex and convoluted, what you do then is you pick the argument that is the most basic and simplest. And in the case of the Shepton miners, that would have been hallucinations. So you just write off the whole Shepton mythology, the out-of-body experience, the near-death experience, the life-after-death experience, write those all off as hallucinations. And that's what they did in this Skeptical Inquirer. I disagree, because we're talking about something that is not simplistic and basic. It is very convoluted. It's complex. We don't know. It's beyond the scientific realm. So I'm glad that they wrote about it. They gave the Shepton mythology even more notoriety, but I think that they were wrong. And, just for the sake of trying to debunk something that they couldn't explain in scientific terms. So.
Well, now with this book, Co-Region Hoodoo, are you confident about how your audience will accept it?
Well, based on how enthused they were with the Shepton mythology, yeah, I really am. We were doing a presentation in at the Schuylkill Historical Society in Pottsville, and some woman came up to me and she shook my hand and she said, "I read your book 3 times." Now, I don't know why she read it 3 times, but she must have liked it. There must have been something there that she liked. But no, we've had a really good response for the book, and I just decided that I wanted to go in that direction. So, Region Hoodoo is an extension of the Shepton mythology. And certainly I talk about Shepton, but I also talk more extensively about Pope John the 23rd. And we blend the paranormal with the spiritual, which is something that I don't think has been done before. But I mean, when we talk about guardian angels and apparitions and miracles, we're talking about something. I think of the paranormal. I think that I call it Roman Catholic mysticism, but it's just as mysterious, as anything else that you'll be talking about on your podcast. So it's Region Hoodoo is an extension of the Shepton mythology, but it goes further and it has a wider scope. It goes deeper.
Gotcha. And, you mentioned that your book has, this unique blend of the spiritual and the supernatural. I mean, why is that?
Well, because that's just the way it is. I talk about, for an example, Pope Francis is currently hospitalized. That's in the news right now. It was Pope Francis that had a dual canonization in 2014 in the Vatican. Typically, when a pope is made a saint, it's only one person, and they have to demonstrate 2 miracles. And in this case, Pope Francis chose 2 individuals. One was Pope John the 23rd, who plays a key role in the Shepton mythology. The miners believe that he was there in the mine with them for 2 weeks and that he saved their lives. Vatican scholars cited Shepton as one of Pope John's the 23rd's miracles. The second pope that was canonized was Pope John Paul II. He was an exorcist, and what he did was he convened a school of exorcism, and he had all of these priests from around the world come there to learn how to go and do perform the rite of exorcism. When we talk about that, we talk about good and evil. We talk about the power of the devil, and I believe that evil does exist. I believe the devil exists, and the devil wants us to think that he or she is just a cartoon, a non-entity. But but I believe that God's power is stronger than that of the devil, and I know when I had interviewed Ed and Lorraine Warren, the demonologist, I mean, this was exactly, what they were talking about and, what they used when they went into battle.
Yeah, and that was one of the really interesting things that you've done, is you spoke directly with Ed and Lorraine Warren. You
I
even
know, yeah.
photographed them.
I know, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and you actually wrote an article up on normalparanormal.org publishing some of these photographs that had never been released.
Yeah.
And, tell me a little bit about that, because that's in the book, right? Like your experiences
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah, and they were great people. They both passed away. Ed and Lorraine Warren, they were from Connecticut. They were Roman Catholic demonologists, and they were involved in the Amityville horror and a whole bunch of other haunted places. The one in Enfield, I believe, in North London. They went over there. All of the Conjuring movies, Conjuring 1, Conjuring 2, Annabelle, all of those motion pictures were based on Ed and Lorraine Warren, and their franchise is the second most successful horror franchise after Godzilla. So, I mean, there's a little quotable quote. But they were in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania in 1988. They were kicking off, they were initiating a 15-city tour to promote the book, The Haunted, and that was about the Schmurl haunting in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. So I went there. I had written a letter to the owner of the Victorian Theater, and I requested an opportunity to photograph them and interview them. So he set that up, and I took pictures. I listened to their program. I remember, I think it was in July, and it was hotter than anything. And they were inside the old theater doing PowerPoint presentation, and they had fans going. I mean, it was like torture, but it was really hot. But afterwards, we went outside and we hung out, and I took pictures, and they were just nice to chat with and to converse with, very unassuming. And then over the years, I would call them up. I was doing some research on the Schmerl haunting, and I would call them up. And Lorraine had a pet rooster, and that would be there. You could hear the rooster in the background in their home in Connecticut. And again, they were just like really nice people. They treated me well, treated me with respect, and they would talk about what they did when they would go into these houses that people believed were possessed with demonic spirits. So and I did include a couple of their pictures in Region Hoodoo, and there is a chapter on them, which they deserve it.
Yeah, like, is there anything that you could talk about, like some of the subjects that you guys had spoken about on the phone? Because I know you had mentioned that you kept in touch with Lorraine for a number of years. Um, Again, I'm sure there's a lot of private conversations, but is there anything that might be able to help those who follow them and who admire them? Like anything, any insights that you could share with us
Well,
and what you learned from them?
just some basic things for the novice person who's getting involved in the paranormal. I would really be careful of things like Ouija boards, tarot cards, seances, fortune tellers. I would sort of stay away from that. I mean, that's getting too close to the flame. They could be portals to dark places, evil places, and so I would just encourage people not to go there. Ed and Lorraine Warren also believe that evil exists. It could be in the form of demonic spirits, and demonic possession. And they would go into places like Amityville and, order the demon to themselves. And they would use holy water and the crucifix. Ed Warren would invoke the spirit of Padre Pio and Jesus Christ and Saint Michael the Archangel to do battle with these spirits, and so he would poison himself and do that. But scary stuff. Some people have never come back from this, and it's not a lark. It's not just a hobby or a light pastime. And this is serious business. And again, I would warn your listeners not to get too close to the flame because bad things could happen. Bad things have happened with possession, and so again, that's my personal viewpoint, but that was also reflected by priests that I've spoken with, and also Ed and Lorraine Warren told me the same thing. So just be careful. It's one thing to talk about it and to read about it, but to actually experience it may not be such a good idea.
Now, when you're diving into a lot of these rather dangerous topics at times, has anything strange happened to you? Like, have you gotten too close to the flame, so to speak, while just simply researching it?
Yeah, I have, and I won't do that again. I mean, I've participated in the things that I said people shouldn't. Ouija boards, tarot cards, seances. I mean, crazy stuff. A lot of this as a college student, but I won't do that again. I mean, I was, on several occasions really terrified by some things that happened, and I don't need to discuss what they are because what was terrifying for me may not be that horrifying for you, but it was something that really spoke to me and scared me, and I won't go there again. Won't do that again. But I do warn people about that. By the same token, wonderful spiritual things that have happened to me, I don't discuss either because those I think are of a personal, sacred nature, between me and my higher power, and I don't need to go and talk about that for notoriety, for my credibility, for my resume, for any of that. And I refuse to do that. I mean, what may have happened to me is something that's just, again, is of a personal nature. And I won't discuss the good stuff, but I will warn people about the bad stuff. Stay away. It's real, and evil exists in many, many different forms. So
Yeah, it really does. And, I think that aspect is certainly underestimated by people who are interested in this subject, who investigate it, who read about it. But at the same token, those experiences that do take place with people, they're very personal, like you touched on, right? Like there's a lot that happens to people every day, and most of those people do not share those experiences because they are so personal. And it leads me to believe that the paranormal happens. Again, it's just my take on it. The paranormal happens, and it's catered to that individual experiencer. And other people could play a role into the experience, sure, but it seems like it needs the experiencer just as much as it needs to create the experience itself, if that makes any sense. When you were growing up, before you got into any of this stuff, I mean, you mentioned the college experiences, but had you had any other just unexplainable things take place in your life that have stood out to you as interesting that you can talk about?
I wish I did. I wish I had something that I could just present to your listeners. But I really haven't. I approach the paranormal as an academic. I used to call myself a paranormal researcher, and then I realized that that's a bit presumptuous. I mean, I'm not a researcher. I don't go into haunted houses and look for demons or ghosts or spooks or any of that. I write about it. I write about it as an academic. I study it. I talk to other people, such as yourself, about it. And, I really have a passionate interest in it. But no, my upbringing, my resume as a teenager and as an adolescent, were all of the things that a lot of us baby boomers were raised on, whether it was Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, One Step Beyond. I mean, that was my education in life after death and hauntings and evil spirits and vampires and all that. I mean, we had just a wonderful upbringing of that because it was just so prevalent. And Twilight Zone was one of the best TV series and with Rod Serling ever. So, it was, a lot of it was political. I mean, they used, the monster was actually communism, or the monster was actually a totalitarian government, but still, we learned from that and, learned and I think a lot of us baby boomers gained the vocabulary of the paranormal through some of these TV programs. So I think that stuck with me. And that probably was one thing that, that really got into my head and stayed there. I mean, I just enjoyed that stuff. But as far as having personal experiences, I really can't think of any. Again, I can think of one thing that happened, but I don't share it with people because a lot of people people tend to discount or think you're crazy or think you need help or healing or whatever, and I don't. So I just don't talk about it. But a lot of the stuff, I think needs to be personal and it's things that I've experienced and that I'll deal with. But I will say my piece through my books and my words and my podcast interviews. But that's okay, and I'm sure that your listeners will respect me for that. There's some things that I certainly want to talk about, and then there's others that I don't think I should talk about. So it's as simple as that, and no attitude, no condescension. Just that's just the way it is.
Yeah, no, that's respectable. It's interesting because a lot of people won't share their experiences. What I found is really helpful is sometimes when others hear about experiences, then they feel kind of empowered to step forward and say, "Yeah, that happened with me too." And you in your book in Cole Region Hoodoo, you interview not just you don't talk about not just Ed and Lorraine Warren, but you're able to interview other personalities, right, and include them in your book. What were some of those other people that you chose to put into this new book?
Well, Fred Tracy was a guy from Derry, New Hampshire, and I heard about him from my cousin Jim, who was a medic, and Jim was living up there in New Hampshire, and he introduced me to Fred Tracy. But Fred Tracy was aboard a aircraft carrier that had a similar experiment as the Philadelphia experiment, and And during World War II, the Germans had these bombs, and when the ships would go over the bombs, these bombs at the bottom of the ocean, the magnetic field would trigger the explosion, so that bomb would explode the ships. So Great Britain figured out a way to degauss these ships. And the gaussing is I guess, a term for the magnetism, a way to measure it. And what they would do is they would wrap coils around the ship and electrify it, and that would sort of kill that magnetic current. So, according to the Philadelphia experiment, they did this. There was an experiment in Philadelphia where the ship was teleported from Philadelphia to Virginia and then back. Men died. Men were fused into the bulkhead, and and then there was a cover-up. Fred Tracy, the guy that I interviewed, was involved in a similar experiment, and he had information, from the higher ups that this actually happened. So I interviewed him, and I put that in the book. But I have a chapter on the Philadelphia experiment, and this year I think it's going to be the 80th anniversary of the Philadelphia experiment. And I've already had, even though the book's only been out a week, I've already had people reach out to me to see if I'm going to be doing anything to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Philadelphia experiment. So that's pretty amazing. I mean, again, the book only being out a short amount of time, and already, people are reaching out. So
It's funny because you mentioned Deering, New Hampshire. I've heard that there are a lot of Bigfoot reports out there, and that community is no stranger to that particular cryptid. What can you tell us about the Bigfoot phenomenon, and did you look into that in your book?
Yeah, I did. Actually, I got pretty excited about Bigfoot. Thousands of people have seen pretty much the same thing. Huge apes, 8 to 10 foot tall, long arms, eyes that don't reflect light, but they emit light. Uh, they describe the Bigfoot as gliding, not walking, either loping or gliding. They talk about the biolocation, where the Bigfoot is in front of you, then it's behind you, that they change. So there's a whole lot of things. So I interviewed people like Tim Renner, who wrote Bigfoot in Pennsylvania. And he's pretty much he doesn't like the word authority, but he is a Bigfoot authority. And I have a chapter called The Bigfoot Hypothesis. So I talk about all these genres, all these categories that you might be able to put Bigfoot into. What exactly does Bigfoot represent? So again, I'll let your readers read that chapter to see what I'm talking about. But I put 2 chapters in my book about Bigfoot. And one of the reasons is because Pennsylvania is the number 3 state as far as Bigfoot sightings, after California and Washington. And a lot of these sightings are in an area called the Chestnut Ridge. It's south of Pittsburgh. It's like a 100-mile stretch from Pittsburgh down to West Virginia. Very remote. And not only are there Bigfoot sightings there, but Bigfoot and UFO sightings together. So strange, high strangeness, if there ever was any. So Stan Gordon is sort of the guy out there. Stan's the man, as far as
Yeah.
Bigfoot and UFO out in Western Pennsylvania. So I had a chance to meet Stan last year. I went out to the Kecksburg UFO Festival and meet him, and then which was really great. He's a great guy, and sort of documenting Bigfoot almost in a scientific methodology. I mean, just very detailed writings and documents. So he's doing a lot for the field of Bigfoot researchers.
Yeah, he's incredible. I've never had the pleasure of meeting him in person, but on that note, can you explain like the difference between science and the supernatural, and why can't they just like go together?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that science and the supernatural or the paranormal, same term. I think they're the same. And the example that I tend to use is the apple. You drop an apple and we see the apple falling. So that's the effect. And the cause is Newton's law of gravity. The apple drops, it doesn't go up, so it drops. So we have cause and effect. That's what we use within the scientific realm. But with the paranormal, we see things. We see lights and apparitions and things happen. We see them, but we don't have a scientific law like gravity to explain what this is. So I believe that a lot of the things that we have, a lot of this paranormal things, high strangeness, are actually within the scientific realm. And maybe at one point we'll be able to understand what that is, what the cause is. And when we talk about UFOs, that's a really good example. I was in the Navy. I'm a Vietnam vet. I was aboard an aircraft carrier. I was a radarman. We would see bogies. These were tangible contacts that were faster and more maneuverable than any guided missile than we had or the Soviet Union at the time had. So we would put them in the logbook, UFOs, range and bearing, and we were told not to talk about it. Now, most of us guys, we were kids fighting a war. We were all like, 20 or younger. So just about 3 years ago, the Pentagon admitted that maybe 3% of the things that we see, that Navy pilots see, are unexplainable. And again, you have three choices. I mean, what are they? They're either ours, they're either Russian or Chinese or Iranian, or they're extraterrestrial. So take your pick. We just don't know. We just don't know. I kind of think that maybe it's stealth technology that we've developed, that we've been able to keep the lid on. But that's just my guess. But I really don't know. It's just too many things happening, and now though, when the military, especially the Navy pilots, report that, they're documented, okay, and they're not covered up. So we know that we're seeing a lot of things. What we know too is that UFOs are changing. I mean, the shape. They're either a tic-tac shape or an oblong shape or a triangular shape. I mean, the shape seems to have changed. And again, the question remains, what are they? So a lot of people have addressed that. And, we started off talking about Hynek, his 1972 book, and he was addressing that. And he had talked to hundreds and hundreds of people and investigated so much of this. And and he didn't know.
Right. Now, I want to go back because you had mentioned that, being in the Navy. My dad was in the Navy too, but he never saw any strange anomalous objects in the sky. You have. You're
Yeah,
saying
absolutely.
you have.
Well, we saw, now again, they were called bogies. They were solid contacts on a radar scope. And, not mass hallucinations, not ducks, not marsh gas, not a reflection from Venus. I mean, the whole litany of excuses that we used to get, in the 50s and 60s about UFO sightings. None of that. I mean, this is technology that works, that picks up solid contacts, and that's what they were. Fast and maneuverable. They were UFOs. We don't. That's what they were, UFOs. I mean, nothing else. I mean, we just don't know who they belong to, and none of that. But yeah, we saw them.
Now, whereabouts do you remember or do you recall where these were seen? And like how frequent were these bogies picked up?
Yeah, they were picked up frequently. Now, again, I was in the OI division, Operation Intelligence, and in all the movies, you see the status boards, the war room. Well, that's where I worked, and so we had numerous radar scopes, and we saw UFOs, these bogies, all the time. We were told not to talk about them. Again, they were for real. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. What's happening today, though, just with the Pentagon, is that finally, after all these decades, the government, the United States government, is admitting that these things exist. And and not giving us that whole litany of things that they're hallucinations or, that nonsense. So at least we're getting real. And part of this is because there's been some presidents that have asked, information about UFOs. A lot of politicians have asked for information. So I think there's been some pressure on the government to at least be a little bit more candid than they had been, in previous decades. So maybe, for ufologists, the climate is a little bit, has more clarity than it ever has. So this is sort of, good news for us as
Yeah.
researchers.
Yeah, definitely. Are there aspects of what's going on now with the UFO topic that you can relate to, especially with the crewmen and the military personnel that were there on the ships seeing these things?
Yeah, I still keep in touch with some of my Navy buddies, and yeah, we talk about the same thing. We saw them, we just don't know what they were. It's the same thing. And we
Huh.
talk about it not with a whole lot of emotion or hysterics or any of that, just that we saw them. And I think the biggest emotion is like the curiosity, like what exactly did we see? But
Yeah.
yeah,
Huh.
they were real.
Have you ever thought about further pursuing that line of research in, a future book, right? Where you look specifically at those UFO reports that you were present for and do some digging around, see what you can pull up.
I don't know if I would do that. I think if I did a follow-up book to Co-Region Hoodoo, I think it would be one that would probably uh, go more into what I would call a spiritual realm. Again, guardian angels, apparitions, miracles, exorcism, demonic possession, things like that. There's something about that again that speaks to me. It excites me. I'm really interested in it, and I think that's probably the direction that I would go in. But I'm following. Every time there's an article about UFOs, I read it. I'm a big fan of Ancient Aliens and listen to that all the time. And so and just to stay current and just amazing. What's out there. When you talk about ancient civilizations, just amazing what some of those people did thousands of years ago.
Yeah, and there's some aspects in your book. I mean, your book is reading the little synopsis that you have on Amazon. It's very diverse, right? You
Yeah,
cover a lot of ground with this,
yeah.
and like how are you able to kind of include so many of those diverse variables into that book and still remain somewhat cohesive in the general thesis of it? Like, what connects it all together?
Yeah. I think what connects it is that I take a sociological look at the paranormal. I blend in some popular culture, some spirituality, and put it together in this little box uh, that takes place in Pennsylvania. And I call it the co-region hoodoo, but co-region is a metaphor for Pennsylvania, for the entire state. And I talk about Night of the Living Dead, the Blob, and the Philadelphia Experiment, motion pictures that were unique to Pennsylvania and what they represented. And for example, last summer we went out to Monroeville. We went to the Night of the Living Dead Museum, and then we went up to Evans City, and the mayor, Dean Zinkhan, gave my wife and I a tour of the Evans City cemetery where Night of the Living Dead was shot, released in 1968. Most people think that Night of the Living Dead is this zombie movie, the undead come to life from an ancient a meteor, life force and all that. But it pretty much was a sociological take about what was happening in the United States in 1968. The Tet Offensive, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy, riots in the streets. Just horrible, horrible things happening. There was almost a meltdown of our society. And I start my book out with Night of the Living Dead and what it really represented. And so I have a couple of chapters that take a look at that. that talk about fear as a motivator, why, we are attracted to monster movies, horror movies, and then look at some real life monsters. And so I think I mix it up, and I think and shake it up, and what comes out, I think, is a cohesive product. And again, we're just going to have to see what the readers say about this. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I hope that they accept my direction and and my version of the paranormal. But you know, but it is comprehensive, and I'm really proud of this book. I mean, it's published by Beyond the Fray. They're a paranormal publishing group from San Diego, and all they do is paranormal themes, not fiction, not thrillers, just paranormal stuff. So
the publishing process with Beyond the Fray, I hadn't heard of them. I had heard of Beyond the Fray as a radio offshoot, but I hadn't heard about the publishing aspect. Like, how did you find them, and what was it like working with that publishing company?
First of all, I have to thank Tim Renner, the Bigfoot guy, for telling me about that. I was I was finishing my manuscript, and I was looking for a publisher, and I wanted to get somebody who was more specific to the paranormal and somebody who would help me with promotion. And so Tim Renner told me about Beyond the Fray. So I reached out to them, and we negotiated a contract. And then over a 3-month period, and for your fledgling, aspiring writers out there, it took about 3 months to go from proofreading, accepting the manuscript, proofreading, formatting, working on the cover with a graphic designer over a 3-day period, and then finally getting it published. So it was about a little over 3 months. And I did get one book in hand, that I was really pleased with it. I mean, it looks good, it feels good, it's solid, and you want something that you're going to be proud of, and something that is as error-free as is humanly possible. I think that it's relatively clean as far as no typos and just stupid, basic, amateurish mistakes. But I think it reads well, and I did get an email from a woman from New Mexico who was Googling UFOs and found the book, and she's reading, and she's emailing me like every other day and telling me that she likes my writing style, and making remarks about the book. It's wonderful, because many times as an author, you don't get the feedback, or it takes a while to get the feedback. Just like in the case of the Shepton book, that I don't know how many years it took for that lady to say, "Hey, I read your book 3 times." That's a pretty nice compliment. And but anyway, Beyond the Fray is the publisher, and they've been very, very good. They also have a podcast, and I don't know if it's called Beyond the Fray or Into the Fray, but they're scheduling me for that, so we're going to be doing that. And also, I'll be on Coast to Coast, and so things are going to be happening.
Great. Yeah, when it's funny because you touched on writing the book, right? When you're working on a book, what does your daily routine consist of? Do you sit down and you just bang out a bunch of pages at once, or do you struggle with it? Like, do you run into those feelings of self-doubt when you're working on a book? Like, how do you get past that?
Yeah, self-doubt is a killer, and you can't allow self-doubt to get into your head. I mean, you just can't. I get up in the morning and I meditate, and I just get into my zone, give myself self-affirmations. And if I need those throughout the day, if I get the monkey mind, if crazy things get into my head, I just meditate again and just find my center. But pretty much, I get up in the morning, meditate, and then I do some writing. I have I call them cutouts, and I don't know where I got that term, but they're just pieces of articles or books that I'm working on, and so I'll work on those cutouts, and they get larger and larger, and I try to work on that every day. And do some research. I try to read paranormal things, and I like to keep up on Bigfoot, UFOs, just some of the current things. And so that's what I do. But I'm pretty structured with my writing, and I don't wait for inspiration to strike. I try to write every day. And again, if you have any fledgling authors out there, I mean, that's really the trick, just to write every day. Well, you've been published numerous times, so how is that how you do it?
Yeah, it's getting in that routine, getting in that good habit of just writing every day, reading something every day, and not just internet articles, like actually picking up something tangible. There's a difference in how
Mhm.
those are written, how a book is written as opposed to an internet article, right?
Yeah,
Which is written for scanning.
yeah.
Um, and uh, and even writing internet articles, it's different than writing a book, right? There's a different a technique, right? Because attention spans are extremely short, as you know,
Right,
because you do presentations. In addition to writing, you also deliver presentations, give
right.
talks, and I'm sure you've seen out there in the audience there are people that will literally fall asleep on you. Um,
Exactly.
and it's like, how do you keep those people engaged? Especially when we're talking about such complex topics like this. It's not really easy to explain these subjects. It takes a certain level of understanding, and you, as you're developing your books, you can see that also in your writing too, right? You're like going through a journey where you're processing a lot of this stuff, you're making sense of it, and you're learning along the way. Like, what did you learn when writing this particular book?
Oh, absolutely. Well, just terminology and definitions, high strangeness and close encounters of the third kind and things like that. I mean, there's all these layers and levels, and I just think that my understanding of the paranormal just got wider. The scope got larger in writing the book and researching the book, and it was just a great experience. And when it finally all came together, I mean, that was just such a wonderful feeling. And you talk about the complexity or the amount of topics, but your book, the spectrum, was sort of like that. I mean, you really were able to capture a whole lot of themes in one book, and I think I really enjoyed your book. I mean, you just did you addressed so many different paranormal topics, and so it's nice to converse with a fellow paranormal author, and I'm sure that you had people that complimented you on just the amount of topics that you included.
Yeah, it's so important to collaborate with other writers, other researchers, other investigators in the field because we can learn a lot from each other. And I remember, sometimes we pick up the phone, right, and we just have these conversations where we're bouncing ideas back and forth.
Yeah,
And as you were working on that book, I could tell by the excitement in your voice, when you kind of had a quote unquote breakthrough, right, and you hit that stride, that momentum, and it
hmm,
kind of carried you the rest of the way. Now, on that token, and I kind of got into or alluded to it a little bit earlier in this conversation, but I'm going to bring back to that again is when we're working on these topics, sometimes we kind of feel guided, right? And I've heard this from not just other writers, but experiencers, where, for lack of a better descriptor, they kind of feel like they're downloading this information and they have to like disseminate it out. Have you come across that, or
that's
have you
really a
heard
good way to
this?
put it. Downloading, or I call it channeling. I mean, I think that sometimes that creativity just is channeled through me from I'm not sure where. I mean, take your pick. I mean, some divine power, some higher power. I'm not sure, but um, when that happens, I mean, you can feel it, and you are just so creative, and you can see things on different levels, and your perspective is just so much different. I mean, you're able to clearly see that topic and write about it, and that's really what we try to do. We try to articulate something that cannot be articulated. That's exactly what we do. It's certainly not articulated in scientific terms. So that's what we bring to the fore. And yeah, I believe that's true. I believe that when I was writing the book, that there were energies that were channeled through me and saw me to the end. But it was a great experience and a positive experience. I mean, when it was getting closer to being, to completion, and getting published was just a wonderful, wonderful feeling of accomplishment. And there was one moment of self-doubt, and that was, I think, when the book was published, and I just had a little snippet of self-doubt. What if they don't like it? What if the readers don't like this book? What if it's not accepted? And I had to go and just get myself back on firm ground and find my center and get beyond that. You can't do that. You need to be, and I am positive and and confident. But as a human being, we have that. We have self-doubt and all the other dark emotions because we're humans. We're not perfect. So whenever things like that happen, you find ways to get out of it, either by talking to people or by talking yourself out of it. So fortunately, I wasn't really hampered by that a whole lot. But another thing with literary people, with writers, I mean, a lot of writers we're all sensitive individuals. I mean, and when and it's hard to take the criticism. And a lot of writers suffer from depression. A lot of writers are addicted to substances or alcohol. And there's a whole long list of people like Edgar Allan Poe who suffered much for their craft. John Steinbeck. I mean, so many people. So, I mean, I don't think you and I are suffering for our craft, but we're enjoying it and celebrating it. But I can see, and I know that some writers do. So
yeah. Yeah, it's really tough, and especially with this topic, because you get into some really dark territory, and like you touched on earlier, right? There are certain things that I think the listener, the audience who's tuning into this show, need to keep in mind, that when you get close enough to this topic, you have to know your limits, right? You have to know when to step back, when to take a break, so to speak. And has that ever happened to you when working with this? Have you ever had that experience where, okay, I just need to take a step back, this is getting too much? Or do you just keep pressing on forward?
Yeah, no, sometimes I need to go and come up for air and get away from it and get recharged. Yeah, I mean, just you could only take so much. And especially when you're talking about dark themes, we try to keep that positivity in our head and all that. You know, and it also, as a writer, it's good to pace yourself, to maybe spend an hour behind the computer and then get away, and then maybe come back. But just, don't wear yourself down. I mean, just be smart about it and be
Yeah.
organized. And that's, I think, the best way to pursue this, when you're working on a manuscript.
Yeah. And speaking of dark stuff, it's in the title of your book. You explain the Coleridgean part,
Yeah.
but the hoodoo part, where does that come from?
Yeah. Well, that was pretty much, there's a term down in Louisiana, the Bayou, the voodoo practitioners. And hoodoo is basically a dark spell that people might put a curse on somebody else. And I decided I wanted to use that for the Coleridge. I used that in somebody else's dream, and I used that term for the first time, but I just think it works, and I wanted to use it for the coal region, and I wanted to do for the Pennsylvania coal region what Stephen King did for the state of Maine. I wanted to go and talk about the paranormal aspects and celebrate them and write about them and get them front and center, because nobody else is doing this in a scholarly way, in an academic way. And I've read some of these paranormal books, and I'm just sort of appalled by some of them that just are not well written. And I think that we can do better. We can do better, as academics, because we're still supposed to be teaching others. But yeah, it's called Co-Region Hoodoo, and it's about the Pennsylvania Paranormal, and like I said, it's published by Beyond the Fray and available on Amazon.
The full title, Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit. And I just love that. It grows on you,
Yeah,
after a while. And that is available by Maxim Furek, and you can find it on Amazon, right? Is that where,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
are there
Amazon.
any are there any bookstores, like local bookstores in Pennsylvania that somebody can go to or that you would recommend that they might pop in, check it out, or
Yeah, I haven't done any of that yet. The book has been out, like I said, for about a week, a little over a week, and I've been setting up book signings and programs, in down here in Florida. I'm in Florida currently, and also I'll be doing that in Pennsylvania. But I haven't touched base with any bookstores, and I think Barnes and Noble may be carrying the book. I know they carried Somebody Else's Dream, but I'm not sure. I'm not you know, really keyed in with that aspect of marketing and promoting.
if somebody wants to get in touch with you and they have like a story to share with you, or they have some, feedback to offer on your projects. Yeah, I know you have a website.
Yeah, yeah, it's www.maximfurek.com. That's MAXIMFUREK.com. www.maximfurek.com. So they could contact me. There's a way to contact me. Um, Or if they wanted to provide feedback for Region Hoodoo, they certainly could go and write a review on Amazon, good or bad, doesn't matter. I mean, just I'd like to see what's working and what isn't. So that would be great too.
And
But
you're on Facebook, you're on
yeah,
Instagram
yeah, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn,
and
and
LinkedIn.
yeah,
So if you want to get in touch with Maxim Furek, go to maximfurek.com. That's MAXIMFUREK. That's maximfurek.com. Or look him up on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn.
yeah.
You can check out all of his work, all of his various books, his various projects. And speaking of projects, do you have any other projects in the pipeline? Because everybody always asks that. You release one book and then they're quick to say, "When's the next one coming out?" What can you tell us?
Yeah, I'm working on one. I call it a tentative title is Dream Gliding, Honoring the Wisdom of the Ancients. And it's sort of like a self-help book, but the premise is that, there's nothing new under the sun, that everything that we hear today from Eckhart Tolle and Deepak Chopra and Anthony Robbins has been articulated 2,000 years ago by Jesus Christ and Buddha and Mohammed. So there's nothing new under the sun. Guys like me and you might have been having this similar conversation 2,000 years ago, only not over the internet. But things pretty much don't change. Human behavior doesn't change. So I wanted to put together a book going deep, and it's slow going because it's just like very cerebral stuff, and it's just like and that's something you asked about the dark stuff, getting away from the computer. Well, this is stuff I have to get away from the computer because it's just like overwhelming, and I need a break from that. But it's coming along nicely, and we'll see what happens. But it's just a side project that I've been working on and having fun with, and looking at some aspects of wisdom that's been with us for thousands of years.
Awesome. That's great. And you're doing speaking events, you're doing presentations. Do you have any lined up? Or where can somebody go to find out where you're going to speak next?
Yeah, they should, and I need to update my website. I'll do that tonight, but www.maximfurek.com. I'll be doing presentations back in Pennsylvania in May and also in June, and I'll be putting that on Facebook and also some of the paranormal sites, but also I'll make sure that I update my website.
Well, that's great. Well, there you have it. Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit by Maxim Furek. He was our guest today. I highly encourage you to check out his work. Look on Amazon, request it from your local bookstore if they don't have it, and visit his website. He's got a lot of great stuff there, and he's going to be posting more stuff there from what you heard now. So we're looking forward to it, my friend, and thank you for for coming on the show and discussing some of your projects with us.
Yeah. And thanks for having me, Justin. And good luck with your podcast. I think it's going to be really successful. I think it's going to be a great show, and you're the right personality for it. So good luck, and I'll be listening. So,
well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. You have been listening to Terror Signals with Justin Bamforth and presented by Normal Paranormal. For more on this show and other topics of high strangeness, please visit normalparanormal.org or visit the program website at terrorsignals.com.